I'm a British national, third generation in UK. The family originates from India, and the family first established in London in 1919 as the first business house. My early life started as a tea taster. That's my first love. It was hard because coming from a very powerful family background, I chose to learn the life the hard way. And as a result, I wanted to go into a business where my family was not involved, and that was tea. So that's how, and 1967, after I lost my father, I was a very young man. I had to come into the family business. 1992, I got involved with Russia. I was the first advisor to the Russian Federation to bring the debt settlement between India and Russia. And in 2000, somebody proposed that why shouldn't I promote the tea? I was getting old, and I said, fine. It was my wife. She said, if somebody can do anything in tea, it's going to be you. So we started the company. We didn't have the right people. So in 2004, I took over the reins. I have always believed to think laterally. I don't like doing things what everybody does. Whether it's my traditional businesses, it's the way I think, it's the way I live. My belief is that you have to be very straight and honest. I strongly believe that wealth belongs to God. I'm not a possessor, nor I own it. I'm a trustee. And there's no reason for false marketing or for any falsehood trying to promote something. And so 2002, when I took over the task of creating a tea company, proper tea company, global tea company, that's where I personally got involved, and we created the first preservation and packaging facility in the world of its type. Because most of the tea companies, the so-called premier tea companies, they have no packaging facilities. They take their teas to job work factories where they're producing, packing tea for 10, 20, 50 different companies. And you can't handle fine tea that way. So that's where the newbie, and our first market, luckily, was Russia. Before we launched in India, before we launched in UK, we launched in Russia. And the Russians have been very kind to newbie tea. And they just love the newbie tea, and it's doing, now newbie tea is spread many places in the world. And we're very fortunate that we are now in Kazakhstan, because I personally believe the Kazakh people are the hardcore tea drinkers. They are the people who truly understand the fine tea. And this is because of the historical relationship between India and Russia, with the escrow account arrangement, and China and Russia, again with the escrow account arrangement. Russia always received, USSR always received, the best of the tea from both India and China. But now things are a bit different. But Kazakhstan now become a republic, and I've heard from so many of my friends, they're always asking, Kazakh, they want the best tea. So that's a little entry of mine to the tea business. The little I have seen, it is fabulous. It is peaceful. People are very warm, very hospitable, and I found them very honest. Because soon I walked in at the reception, the first touch of honesty was, they said, Mr. Sethia, we have upgraded your room. So I said, why? They said, you're a GHA member. I said, yes. So, you know, you're our first member. So to say that openly, to admit that you're the first member, it shows the honesty, and which I admired this honesty. So I think so far it's beautiful, and I hope to come many a times again to Kazakhstan. You see, the purpose of the visit is basically to introduce newbie tea. Tea happens to be my hobby. Tea is not my main business. Yes. Tea is my hobby. It's my first love. But our main business, we are involved in security printing, we're involved in sugar refining, we are involved in banking. I'm also on the board of a bank in Dubai. We are involved in small power generation, in real estate. But 50% of my life's time goes on tea, because I love my tea. So tea culture, 20th century was a destruction of tea culture, because so much of commercialization and falsehood.
You mean all over the world?
All over the world. You see, the knowledge of tea, the international tea brand trying to market their tea, unknowingly, unwillingly, withdrew the attention of the general masses to understand the difference between good and not so good and bad. You see, tea is a culture. It's a 5,000-year-old culture, nearly 5,000. It is the second Chinese emperor, Shennong, 2737 BC, who invented tea. Tea has created and has been prominent in the history everywhere. If it wasn't for tea, there would have been no British Raj in India, because Charles II wanted tea and married Catherine of Bergenza from Portugal. And in turn, they got a gift of Mumbai, which was the starting point for the British Raj in India. If it wasn't for tea, I don't think Britain would have ever lost America, because if you know the history, Boston was known as New England. And when there was difficulty in receiving teas from China in Britain, the British Parliament had raised the taxes, which caused the Boston Tea Party, the famous case story, where 90,000 pounds of tea was destroyed. But you see, one has to remember one thing. Fine tea is never judged by the packaging. Fine tea is like a beautiful woman. A beautiful woman is never judged for her appearance. You judge a beautiful woman by her character. You judge a man from the strength of his mind to be able to protect the woman and the family. Tea is a beautiful woman. Tea was always treasured and recognized for its character. You see, if you look at the 18th century, 17th, 18th century, tea used to sell for 500 to 1,000 gold sovereign per pound. Tea was always kept in lock and key. When Chinese wanted to buy their horses, they used to go to Tibet, and the Tibetans wouldn't sell the horses for gold, they would sell it for tea. So Chinese had to take the tea, to give the tea in exchange for the horses. So tea has a fantastic history, and tea has a fantastic culture. Tea is a teacher to all of us, which not only tells us to read character and to look at the character, but tea also introduces us to the Mother Nature, because ultimately tea is the byproduct of the Mother Nature. It's a blessing. So to me, tea culture has been destroyed. The tea art has been destroyed. I'm giving you a long answer for a short question, but then you also have to look. You also have to look at the 15th, 16th, and 17th century. Tea was never meant for common people. It was always meant for the rulers in Europe, for the kings. It was only in 1840 Queen Victoria gave the right to the Duchess of Bedford to hold the afternoon tea parties. So that was the afternoon tea came in. Tea was served in silver, the greatest silversmithies of Europe. They were busy making tea sets, tea kettles, tea urns, tea ewers, not for the common people, but for the rich and for the rulers. The great masters in porcelain, they were making beautiful Meissen teapots and served teapots. The culture came from China, because this is why it's known as bone china. It's not known as porcelain. But some of the most beautiful artwork was done at that time. So when I looked around, I lost my wife in 2010, and I said, what could I do to thank her, to express my sense of gratitude? And I saw that there was not a single private tea collection museum in the world. The tea culture practically died. The most beautiful silver smithies, masters, they produced those sets. Either they were sold or melted in 1930s at the time of Great Depression. Most of the porcelain, the china, broke and nobody treasured them. So I started collecting tea accessories. When I say tea accessories, I must qualify. I started collecting in memory of my wife, and I've called this collection Chitra Collection. That was the name of my wife. This collection contains pieces from the 2nd century BC till the 19th century. Ceramics, silver, gold, by some of the greatest masters. And I think today this collection is probably the biggest, single largest collection of fine objects in the world. Now, it tells you something. It tells you something about me. I'm not in the tea business for money, because I believe God gives money. I can't make money. Therefore, I have tried to reintroduce the lost culture by, first of all, preserving my teas. Now, we created a facility in India. This is the only facility in the entire world which preserves the tea. Okay, what is the correlation of preservation to the humans? You see, when children are born, we have to preserve the children from getting polluted, from evil, from bad habits, from dirty habits, from bad company. The same way, tea, when it's tasted to be valued, it's valued based on the moisture content it has. At that time we say, this tea is worth $2, this tea is worth $20,000. But people have forgotten that some of the finest teas in the world sell for even 10 to 15, $20 million a kilo. Okay? Now, most people, now give you an example. There's a tea known as Da Hong Pao in China, which is from the Hui region that produced. That tea is sold by the government in small lots, 20 grams, 30 grams, and there are people like me who are happy to pay $50,000 for 25, 30 grams of tea. So I think somebody has to take a sincere approach to tea and not, well, if we go to the hotels, most of the hotels, they have teas, they want to buy it for 5 rubles, 1 ruble, 3 rubles, 2 rubles, 10 rubles. But when they want to sell it to the customer, they want to sell it for 50 rubles, 75 rubles. People have money. We decided that we are going to embark on a path where we do not mislead or betray our consumer. Tea needs, you see, tea like human life has 4 stages. Let me define you first. There are different types of teas. There's black tea, there's green tea, there's white tea, there's red tea, but there's oolong tea. But nowadays, the general expression tea also implies to infusion. Very common in Europe. You put some dry fruits in it, you put some nuts in it, and even if it's a tisane, let's say chamomile, they will say, oh, can I have chamomile tea? But there is no chamomile tea. There is no peppermint tea. It's pure peppermint. So tea in its purest form is tea. Now, I can talk more about the black tea because I have some background on cultivation of tea in India. Tea has 4 seasons. You have the first flush, when the tea is very tender, the new shoots are coming out. You have the second, what we call the childhood. You have the second stage, which is known as the second flush, which is full of vigor, full of youth, which is the peak season, the prime time production. Then you have the autumn production, which is sometime starting from the middle of August going up to October. And then you have the fall, that is the old age, when tea has the appearance but no character. Now, the fine tea, if you look at the total percentage of the fine tea, and this is, I would say this is an awareness which has to be created. Now everybody have the access to the internet and they should start reading it. Fine tea, the quantity of fine tea produced is hardly 2% of the teas in the world. Hardly 2%. The rest of the teas are okay, average, but 90% of the tea is cheap tea. Because that's what happened in the 20th century when the tea bags came. The cheap tea was introduced by saying, okay, the taste is so bad, put some milk in it, put some sugar in it. So for God's sake, if you're putting milk and sugar, are you tasting the milk and sugar or are you drinking tea? But you see, tea requires its own time. Tea requires a meditation. Tea in the first century, second century, third century, besides the ruler, the monks, the priests, they used to drink tea because they could meditate, they could concentrate. Tea, you have to awaken your palates, the sensitivity of your palates to feel the subtlety, the fineness and the beauty, not only of a prolonged taste, but also the aroma of the tea. Tea has its own aroma. Different character, different teas from different regions have different characters. Yeah, but this is not the original Kazakh tradition. This is the original tradition. I will never accept it because I know one thing for sure. At the time of the Song dynasty, the Tang and Song dynasty, tea was a prevalent culture all over the East. India got introduced to tea only in 1830. Before 1830, Indians didn't know how to drink the tea or what was tea. Europeans didn't know what was tea. Europeans were introduced tea only by the Portuguese, which was in the late 14th century, early 15th century. Okay? But concept of Kazakh drinking milk, if you say, I will accept it, but I don't believe it. Because the Kazakh people were, you see, there was a prime culture at the Bow, at the time of the Bow dynasty, 5th century BC. China, the Greater China, all of them were drinking tea. And I've never seen a milk pot produced in the 10th century. I've seen the milk pots being produced in the 17th and 18th century. Okay? But then, if they were drinking milk, where were the milk pots? You have the ewers to put the pure water, because without the pure water, the tea, you're destroying the tea. Okay? So I don't personally believe. Now you drink tea with milk because you're being offered cheaper qualities of teas which do not have their own character. It's foul taste, bad character. So the Britishers and Europeans introduced, they say, okay, the tea taste is bad, you have to boil water and drink, because those days the water wasn't that pure. In the 18th and 19th century, before you drink water, you had to boil it to drink. And it was hard when you're eating food to drink hot water. How do you swallow? So they said, okay, in the 20th century, they said, put the tea, don't see the color of it, it's in the tea bag, put it in the hot water, it will have some color. If it tastes good, fine, drink it. But if it doesn't taste good, put some sugar in it. So then you taste the sugar, you're not tasting the tea. But even by adding sugar, if you still have bad taste, put some milk, then you start drinking milk. You're tasting milk, you're not tasting tea. So this culture has to be brought back, because you see, 200 years back there were very few rich. Today, The world is full of rich people. The world is full of educated people. The world is full of people who want class, who want to have the best. They don't want to be cheated. They don't want to be fooled. So somebody have to take the crusade to introduce the right product. I don't say that my tea is the best, because everybody wants to call his tea the best. But all I can say, in the last 7 years, we have won probably 70 or 80 world championships. But I am not the judge for those championships. These are championships like North American World Tea Championship. This is hardcore tea championships by the Americans. You can't find your way or push around or start giving medals by taking some money. So we're very proud that our tea is being recognized. Now, but because, as I said to you earlier, the percentage of fine tea is very small. But no, mostly, you see, because it's a new culture introducing fine tea, what is happening today, people are trying to find good tea for cheap prices. You can never find fine tea for cheap prices. Let me tell you, our cost of buying good teas from last year to this year has risen by 500%. Because after we started this tradition of fine tea, so many companies have started coming up. Everybody wants to buy some fine tea so that they can say, we buy fine tea. But what do? Some of these international brands, they buy the fine teas to mix it with the cheap teas to create a blend and to say we are premier tea. How do they make their tea premier? They make their tea premier by dressing them beautifully, packing them in beautiful package, and doing fabulous marketing to convince people that we are a known brand. Now, sorry, we are not on that street. Success of Newbie will depend only on God's will. I can also tell you one more thing. Newbie is the only tea company in the world, international brand in the world. 30% of this company is owned by a British registered charity. So whatever, whoever, if there is any money which is being made, goes to the charity for the welfare. This charity is doing a lot of work. We have, last year we started the first robotic surgery training center in London at the UCL, University College London. This is the first of its kind in the world, where we train the surgeons, okay? 5 days back, 5th of September, we had an inauguration, again dedicated to my late wife, known as Chitra Sethia Autism Center. 1.5% of the British population suffer from autism. There is no cure for autism except for nice behavior and kind behavior. So we decided to dedicate an entire complex to the autism people, and we brought in Autism Research Trust and the National Autism Society in Britain under one roof. And this facility was inaugurated by Her Royal Highness, the Countess of Wessex, our British member of a British royal family. So, you see, I am not too worried about my success or my failure. At my age, it doesn't matter. And as I told you before, tea is my hobby. I'm not trying to make money out of tea. This tea collection, what we have, the museum, which I've just mentioned to you earlier also, these are some of the greatest pieces the world will ever see. But when, I don't know. At the moment, they're not in a museum. They may not be in a museum as long as I'm living, because this is something very personal to me. I want to cherish see my sentiments through these pieces. But these pieces, some of these pieces are the greatest work of art. But for the 20th century, 20th century, there was decline in art also, because all the teapots were made out of steel or simple white porcelain. So I said 21st century was decline. Then what are we going to do in the 21st century? So in 21st century, I decided to design some teapots. But we had to be again thinking out of the box. We had to be different. So I designed some teapots which were made from gold, silver, studded with emeralds, rubies, and diamonds. Now, that thought never occurred for 5,000 years to any of the rulers or the aristocracy before. Now, we have some of these teapots as part of our 21st century collection. They cost you millions to make because diamonds are not cheap, neither the rubies or emeralds are cheap, nor making them is cheap because this is some of the finest craftsmanship. So I can show you a picture of one of the teapots, which for the 21st century, which I call the moon pot. If you allow me, I'll show it to you. Because people they're entitled to know. This is a teapot. This is enamel, okay?
Yeah, it's really
And the moon, what you see, is a diamond. It's a 5-carat diamond. On top of the teapot, you see a mermaid, okay? This mermaid is holding a pearl. Do you understand?
Yeah.
And you see all these stars, they're diamonds. So what I'm trying to say that I don't care about the money side of it. As long as I live, I will keep trying to create some of the finest teas. I could make mistakes. I'm a human being. These are teas that are being packed by human beings. My people can make mistakes. But all I can tell you one thing. None of our partners or the people who work in our company, they don't work for money. They work for satisfaction. Oh, because the people here can afford fine teas. It's very simple. Because if I take these fine teas to Bangladesh to sell them, I'm not going to sell them. I will sell them, but very few people will buy. But here in this country, you have lots of affluent people. You also have needy people, but you also have some aristocracy. You have some history, people who are highly educated, people who can afford, and they want fine tea. They're not looking for cheap tea. Because, you know, what good is cheap tea? It's like a beautiful woman with no character wanting to become the queen. Is it practical? Is it possible? I don't think so. It's like the king wanting to go to a public bath to get dressed. Is it practical? No, it is not practical. So this class segregation has been there ever since we have known the history. There are poor, there are middle class, there are rich. But newbie tea is not only for the rich, it is for everybody. Because a good cup of tea doesn't cost you a fortune. I'm not selling teas worth 500 gold sovereign per pound. I'm selling fine teas, which will cost you probably 2 or 3 times more than the so-called other fine international brands may cost. So it's a big difference. It's a big difference in thinking. Our thinking is different. I think differently, and I'm happy to think differently. If it succeeds, I'll be delighted, I'll be thrilled. And our partners here in Kazakhstan, I think they're very committed. They are not coming into this tea to introduce, to be cursed or to be challenged by the masses to say, hey, your chairman came here on the television, he made a lot of statement, but this is nonsense. No, it is not nonsense. We are very proud of our tea. Every single tea of ours is selected and international brands. Brands like Assam, Darjeeling, Jasmine. These teas, these are pure teas. These are preserved teas. We provide our teas more facilities than an average person will provide to his children. My teas are kept at different temperatures in the warehouse. The system has total purification, air purification system to allow my tea to breathe and not get contaminated by the breathing of other teas. We allow a dehumidification system where we pack our teas. There's no other tea company in the world, international or local tea company, which provide these facilities. So I'm very honored to be in Kazakhstan, very grateful to the people of Kazakhstan to listen to what I have to say. I hope that you will enjoy drinking. Try one time, because it's always good to try and then be the judge. If there is anybody has any problem, we have the address. If there's any problem, they can write direct to me, and I promise you, I will look into this issue immediately. But we are also aware people may try to sabotage, because we have experienced that somebody tried to put a dead rat into our tea, because the hotel manager was not interested in buying our tea, and he wanted to run us down. He knew that we were going high. But these things can happen. But we welcome any team to visit our facility in Calcutta and to see for themselves that we are the only tea company in the world who does what we say.